a Norway trip report on today's Milenomics² podcast.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Simon.
And I'm Robert Dwyer.
And this is the Milenomics² podcast, no annual fee edition.
If you're not subscribed to the full Milenomics² podcast, you're missing out on a deeper dive into trip reports like the following. We're going to do a trip report on your recent trip to Scandinavia, specifically and exclusively Norway, I believe. You didn't dip into some of those other countries accidentally, did you?
You know, it's possible when I got a little turned around, I ended up in Sweden for a minute.
It looked close.
I'd have to check my timeline. And, you know, that if it was Sweden, I'd looked exactly the same as Norway at that point. So
yeah, be careful you don't get into Russia up there. I mean, we're going to cover a lot of this country on this trip. I probably am going to get out of Google Maps, and people would be well served to reacquaint themselves with the geography of the region because, you know, I think I would be better at selecting countries, on a map, like on a test, like you do in civics class in high school or something like that, or whatever that class was that we were supposed to learn where all the countries and states were. It gets a little fuzzy up there in Eastern Europe and then further north. And so you covered this entire country. Was that the intent? Were you specifically focused on Norway, or was it just anywhere in Scandinavia and Norway was the most generally appealing or most doable? How did you pick Norway?
You know, longtime listeners of the show, Robert, know the following about me. I love being in like remote places, but not really remote places, right? Like I'm not the kind of guy that's like, I'm going to backpack for 2 days and then tent camp. I just like going where there aren't a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And Norway, not a lot of people. You know, there's more people in the county that I live in than the entire country of Norway, but also really accessible. You know, there's completely, we'll talk through this trip report of all the different modes of transportation that I took. And then getting into Scandinavia, I had heard that it was really like a different feel than Europe, a different feel than anywhere else in the world. And so it seemed like one of the countries to go to because it also had the most coastline, and we really like coasts. You know, we really like being near the water, on the water with like those views. And so as we started going through this trip, we started meeting people from Sweden and Finland and all these other countries that came to Norway for various reasons. And so I think we made a good choice. I'm not saying that those other countries aren't great. I'm sure they have other things going for them. And being part of Scandinavia, I'm sure some of those things are universal. But the coastline, the fjords, the natural landscapes, those were all the things that we were looking for. But we really didn't want to be around a lot of people. I think we were successful in all areas here. We really had 3 areas. So I guess we could start with the scope of the trip. It was really, we're going to land in Oslo because I could not get us anywhere else. And then from Oslo, we were going to spend a couple days to like acclimate and then head up north to Tromso, which is way north. I mean, it's way in the Arctic Circle. It's the northern capital of Norway, and do some sightseeing there, and then travel to these Lofoten Islands, which are like supposed to be, you know, just they really are what they're said to be, just unbelievable views and just really dynamic, changing landscapes there. But that sounds so easy to say, and then we needed to head back to Oslo and eventually get home. But the country itself is difficult to get around. I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself because we're not even in Norway yet. I'm still sitting in Los Angeles. I need to get to Norway, and that alone is tough, Robert. I think it was really one of those conversations that we had along the trip saying, like, this place is great, but man, it would be greater if it was so easy to get to, or so much easier to get to, at least from Los Angeles.
Well, maybe if people aren't regular subscribers and listeners, they don't know where you live. You mentioned the biggest county. You live in Los Angeles County, so not to sell that county short. That is a big county, the population difference there. But then stepping back and talking about the coastline in your home state of California versus Norway, I Googled this when you were there because you look at the map, like you're saying, and just thinking in terms of logistics and getting around. There is so much. There's like all these tiny little islands and fjords and everything. Yeah. The coastline of California, according to my rapid Google search here, is 840 miles long. Did you look up how many miles Norway's main coastline is estimated to be?
I did not, but it is so jagged with so many fjords. It's got to be a multiple.
It is, right? 840 versus 63,000. miles. Is that possible, or is that just sloppy Google search? But it's possible, I think, right?
It is completely possible, and it makes travel in the country really difficult, especially north-south travel. Because if you imagine, like north-south, let's keep the California analogy. You want to drive from LA to San Francisco, you drive from LA to San Francisco. But if you had two cities that were like geographically north and south of each other in Norway, you would constantly be going around these fjords and back around. And so the actual distance might be 400 miles, but your total distance you're going to drive is probably 2 or 3 times that because there's so much backtracking going on. And so then you look at other modes of transportation, and you have ferries and you have flights and you have other ways of getting there. But what it nukes, what it takes out of the equation really are those train trips. You know, there's not a great way to get long distances on high-speed trains because the high-speed rail network needs really long stretches of flat land to be able to go fast. And on top of that, you've got mountains and all kinds of other terrain to deal with when you get away from the coast. So you've got slow trains that take a long time with circuitous routings. And that's not good for a family of 4 because I've got 2 kids. I always say when we travel, we have mobility issues. And so getting there alone was half the battle, but then transiting around the country was also like a challenge in itself.
That sets the stage really well. Remind us again, how long were you planning to be there, and how did you settle on that duration of the trip?
We were going to be there 2 weeks. We were going to be there 13 nights and didn't get great options. You know, the routings and the carriers are part of the issue, but we wanted to have as close to those 2 full weeks as possible, including that last weekend. But the closest we could get would be a return that started on a Thursday night and then returned on a Friday morning from Paris. So the routings were all on Air France. And there are a lot of ways to get to Norway. I mean, there are routes that take you with British Airways, and there's routes that you can fly with Air France, and there's KLM, and then there's a whole host of other Star Alliance carriers like Lufthansa that you can fly there. But the only nonstop is on Norse Atlantic Airways. Robert, do you know what Norse Atlantic Airways is even? Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of it. And I was thinking this is like from the East Coast getting to Southeast Asia or Thailand or something like that. I don't think there's a direct flight from anywhere in Thailand, the United States, but there are direct flights from Norway to like JFK, I think, right? So
Miami, LA.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, there is to LA?
But on that Norse, Norse Atlantic.
Okay. So this isn't even SAS, which would be more the normal carrier. Is that right?
Not
or is
SAS, right?
No. Yeah. Okay. So you could.
Is there an SAS from New York to Norway?
I thought there was to Boston even, but they are so stingy with the word availability. It's almost like they don't exist to us in a sense, right? So tell me about Norse. You looked at that option, I take it.
I did look at that option. You know, I don't know a lot about Norwegian low-cost carriers. I do remember Norwegian having a large rollout, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago or more, saying like, hey, you know, you can fly to Norway for $200 one way or something like that, but you got to pay for the bags, and you got to pay for the snacks, and you got to pay for everything, right? Real, true low-cost carrier to Norway. And that folded, and I believe somehow through restructuring, Norse came up. So you have a 2-cabin flight, economy, and what they're going to call premium economy, which is like a recliner. Everything is an add-on. You know, you've got to pay for the baggage and the seat selection, but the real killer is the flight is only like 3 times weekly.
Oh,
and so you have really low frequency. You know, I think at the end of this trip, we could have gotten on board with it. You know, I don't want to bury the lead. We fell in love with the country. It's a great country. We would go back for sure. All of us, even my kids agree they want to go back. But, you know, we were talking like, well, can we get on that nonstop and sit in the premium economy? And I think everyone was on board with that. But, you know, the pricing was awful by the time we looked at it. And the frequency wasn't going to work. It's like, they fly like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday or something ridiculous like that. And so then, you know, we're sitting there like, well, we don't want to leave on Friday. We're already leaving on Friday. I want to leave on Saturday or Sunday. No, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
There's just too many concessions to fly it for someone like me. Now, that said, I've got a friend that's going to fly it in 2 weeks. And he says, oh, it's great. I got the ticket. I'm sitting in regular economy. It's $389 one way.
Oh, wow.
More power to you. It's, you know, if you can do it, I think it flattens some of the issues of connecting. But I'm here to say, Robert, the connection wasn't a big deal.
That wasn't the problem.
Right. If the nonstop existed and it was perfect and, you know, it was like multiple carriers and we're on a like single stop itinerary, sure, I get it. But no one was like, oh, I wish we had flown on Norse Atlantic in economy instead of, you know, connecting in Paris and flying on Air France. I think being able to book the flight with the way that we booked it and get there with the connection has opened up more of the world to us. The conversations now are into Southeast Asia, like you're saying, and into places where there's a connection because I was thinking in my head, Robert, it's probably been 5 years since I flew the family on a connection instead of a nonstop, you know, or a connection anywhere instead of a nonstop. I became so focused on nonstop options that maybe I'm missing parts of the world that don't offer a good nonstop option from Southern California.
That's a great point. You get spoiled with all the good options of places that you can take direct. And then, if you're not going to a place that you've always wanted to go to just because it does involve a connection, sometimes the connections work out just fine. Other times they don't. But what did you end up doing for the, would you do Air France in both directions, or what did you do on the outbound?
We did Air France in both directions, and on the outbound we had a daytime flight, left LAX at about 1:30. Connected in Paris, we had a 4-hour layover. I thought that was originally going to be way too long. And, everything takes time. You get off and you're in 2E, Terminal 2E in Paris, and then you've got to clear all the way over to the other terminal. You got to take the train, and then you get there, you walk through passport control, and all of a sudden, 90 minutes are gone. Yeah. And you're like, how did that happen? And then you get to the lounge, we took a shower, everybody refreshed, had some breakfast. And I look at my watch and I go, we better go. We're out of time. Yeah. And so 4 hours was perfect. I thought I really was agonizing over that. And I'm skipping over one nice part of flying Air France out of LAX. I got to go into the new Air France lounge at LAX. Brand new, had opened 3 weeks earlier. And Robert, one of the things we always talk about is new is better. And it really is. I mean, is it a world-class lounge? No. But it's brand new. And so everything is new. You can see the employees have this pride, right? They're wiping down everything and, a little something's, they're just grabbing it right away and they want it to look perfect. And nothing is scuffed, nothing is damaged, everything's perfect. And it was a great experience. Even my wife was like, wow, this is a great lounge. And I think it's just because it's brand new. I mean, there's no view. You're in the middle of you got to walk a mile to get there. It's really inconvenient if you're not flying Air France.
Yeah, the international lounge in an American airport. Have a lot of these in Boston. They've been improving them gradually. It seems like. I mean, some of them are very subterranean and an afterthought. But in this world where it's airlines think about credit cards first and credit card companies think about lounges first. You see even the importance of that. It's very out of the way though. You're saying if you're going to fly, isn't there some priority pass angle if you're going to fly, but not on that? Maybe you wouldn't even be in that terminal anyway. It's not viable, but it worked very well for this case. And I think it's nice to have good international lounges even for something that's where they fly one flight a day out of there, maybe two.
I think it's 2 flights a day out of there. The airport itself is so big. We talked on, I think, our last show or 2 shows ago, we were talking about that new Delta One lounge that's opening at LAX. And I think you can access that lounge with a business class Air France ticket. I think. International ticket. I think as part of the rules to get into the Delta One lounge, that is an allowable way to get in. But that lounge, Robert, is, I'm not lying, probably 1.5 miles or more from the Air France gates. You've got the subterranean tunnels, and then you got to get back up, and then you got to go down, and you got to walk through the other tunnel, and you got to find it. And forget it. I mean, it might be the greatest lounge in the world, but if I'm flying Air France, I'm not walking to the Delta terminal for, with 2 kids with mobility issues. Again, if I'm single and I want, that's a completely different situation. But you pass the Centurion lounge to get to this lounge. You pass all these other things to get to this Air France lounge. It's not better than all of those other things. And it's certainly not worth doing the opposite. If you have access to it somehow, walking all the way to it, you're at the dead end of LAX Tom Bradley International Terminal. Interestingly enough, you're where Hawaiian Airlines drops you off. If you remember that show where I talked about that trip report. So we were having these flashbacks as a family of being dropped off by Hawaiian Airlines when my carry-on got stolen, and racing through these tunnels to try to catch this person with our carry-on, and all of us were like, this is very familiar in a bad way, but the end of the tunnel had this lounge, and we were there maybe 45 minutes. We really didn't spend a lot of time there. We timed everything to try to be at the airport as little as possible, and got on the flight. And the magic of flying, Robert, is just, it never stops to amaze me. But take off at 1:55. I think we were very, very late, 40 minutes late taking off. And, the kids did great on the flight. Everything was really super easy because it was just, okay, we're in this plane. We're going to land in Paris, and then that's it. And so, I think it's a 10-hour flight, and it went by pretty quickly, I think. It was the same distance to get to Japan.
Yeah, so we'll watch a couple movies, go to bed. I don't know if you mentioned, you were in business class in both directions on this, right?
Yes, that's correct. All 4 of us.
Air France has been serving us well, I think, a lot of people for getting to Europe this summer. You're not even going to, I came back from Italy, Air France. It just seems to be a carrier that is more commonly coming up, or maybe some of the more common ways to get to Europe with low taxes and fees aren't presenting themselves as frequently. So Air France is a nice bailout maneuver. You transfer points over to Air France from a lot of bank partners, and you have to pay a little bit of taxes and fees. But all things considered, it's a pretty good deal still, right? Is that how you booked it?
Absolutely. It is a great deal. That's how I booked it. The taxes and fees in one direction were over $300. But the alternative, there was no good alternative. I think that was part of the calculation in taking these flights. I was looking up to the very last day for better routings, and they just didn't exist. It's like I could fly LA to Copenhagen to Finland over to Oslo. It's like, no, they're not going to do that, even if it saves me anything. It's just too many pressure points and pain points for my situation. But they have been releasing a ton of availability, and the cabin is very big, Robert. Their first class cabin has 4 seats. Their business class cabin, what's the over-under? You think it has more or less than 60 seats in the business class cabin?
Well, first of all, it's interesting that they have a first class cabin. I remember one time I was trying to figure out how to get upgraded to first class on an Air France flight. It's this La Premiere thing. You got to pull this maneuver. And I'm like, oh, wait, a first class cabin doesn't even exist on the plane from Boston to Paris. So yeah, there's no way to get upgraded to it. The flight has to exist. The cabin has to exist. Okay, so you're putting the over under at 60. I'm just trying to scale it to the JAL flight that I've been on recently. I don't even remember what the numbers are on that. I'm just thinking like percentage of the plane. I'm gonna say that it feels like it's about half the real estate of the plane, but I would say 45 is my guess.
No, there's like 68 seats by my count in business class.
Oh, more than that. Wow.
It is more than half of the plane's real estate. I think personally, and then you have this really small premium economy cabin that's only 4 rows, and it feels very exclusive in that premium economy cabin. To the point where I had my wife go back there at one point, and I said, what do you think? And she was like, not bad, actually. If we could do that on the way home, I'm okay with that. And so...
What do you mean you had her go back there? Like, go sit back there, see if they kick you out until you get back in the business class.
There's a little partition between where we were. We were really back in the business class cabin. So the lavatory area we used was right there at the divider. And I just said, peek your head in. That's the premium economy that I was talking about.
It's not that bad.
And she had heard your trip report, and you had said it wasn't that bad flying JAL premium economy. And so it actually worked. She was open to the idea of it on the return if it made things easier. So, it was a very lackluster business class experience. It was just like, it's the bed. It really is the bed. That's it. You watch a couple movies, and then, I don't know, I slept maybe 4 hours, 5 hours. My kids slept 4 or 5 hours, and you land in Paris, and it's morning. You're kind of energized throughout the day, and we make that 4-hour connection. We land in Oslo. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So all we had to do was make it to nighttime, and I felt really confident that, like our Japan trip, if we can land at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening local time, get the kids, in bed, they're probably exhausted, and then really hit the ground running the next morning. And it worked out. It worked out again this time to do that, because the next morning, everybody slept great. We woke up at, 5 a.m. and just, boom, hit the ground.
Wow, terrific. And your kids are getting to be the age where you don't need to tend to them quite as much as when they were
That's true.
Quite a little bit younger, right? So I think that flight had to be more relaxing than it has than previous journeys have been, even a couple of years ago, right?
No, that's a great call out. It was much more relaxing for that reason. Now, the business class cabin, the way they have it configured, you really can't get close to a kid because Air France makes you pick a window seat for any child. The best way to really be connected to a kid would be they're directly in front of you, or maybe you pick 4 seats in the middle where one adult is behind each kid and then an adult is also next across from each kid. You can't do that. They will not let the kids sit in those seats. So you're always going to have an aisle across from you. And, in one situation on the way back, my son was a row ahead of me and across the aisle. And it worked out. I told him hey, if you need me, just wave your hand. I'll see you. Wave your hand into the aisle and I'll see you. But yeah, they're getting to the age where it's easier, where they're just taking care of themselves for the entire 11 hours.
I love it. You're building up,
you're
building up skills there that, little by little make them more independent travelers. I just have memories of the kids when they were younger. You're like, is he okay? Did he order dinner there? What is he eating? What's going on over there?
Oh yeah, that's good. The young years were really tough. I think 2, 3, 4. Where you're not allowed to have them with you. They need their own seat. They're still almost in a car seat. And there's periods where you just can't get up and take care of them. That actually is probably easier in something like premium economy or economy, those ages, because being right next to them is just so important. But yeah, we're in this like golden age right now, Robert. They're pulling their own luggage, you know? I mean, it's all of the like stress and pressure points in the airport have been really flattened at the ages of 9 and 5. And I'm glad that we were able to keep traveling through the other ages, but let's talk a little bit about landing and that magical question we always talk about when you land at an airport, right? You know the question I'm asking, right?
The famous question of what's the best way to get from the airport to, city center?
We land in Oslo and, you've got to get to your hotel. And this is the first, I had to do real research situation. And I like just-in-time information. I don't like to do too much information research ahead of time. But I did think I needed to know how to get to our hotel. And our hotel was the Clarion hub, which is like across the street from Oslo Central Station, right in downtown Oslo. And I thought, this is a slam dunk, Robert. I've got to take the train. Because I looked at like an Uber or private transit, and not only was it 4 to 5 times the price of taking the train, it was slower because the train is this straight shot through the countryside, and we needed 4 of those. We were actually transiting from Oslo Station to this hotel 4 times in two different trips.
Oh, wow.
So I said, we got to get good at this, and there are 2 train companies that do this trip. It's probably like 30 miles, probably 25 miles from the airport to the center of the city. And there's Fly2Get, which is apparently the only like real high-speed train in the country. And they tout themselves as that. You read about it. We're the only high-speed rail in Oslo or in Norway. And then you have VY or Vi. I don't know which it is, but Vi is more, I think, like local train, right? So you're still moving at a good speed, but it's never considered high-speed rail. And the pricing on them is not the same. Fly2Get seems to spend a lot of money on advertising, and it's like the number one thing that came up when I was searching how to get from the airport to the city center. And it's about $24 per person one way. VY was half of that, $12 per person one way. And when you dig into the, you think, well, I want to be on the faster train. I want to get to Oslo. But when you dig into the timetables, it's 26 minutes on Fly2Get and 27 minutes on VY. It's insane. Like there's only like one stop between there. So like Fly2Get doesn't make that stop and saves 1 minute or something like that. Because how fast can that travel in city center areas? It can't get to high speed. And so I'm not saying that Fly2Get's not a good resource if you're trying to get further out into the countryside, or if you're taking a longer train trip, or if you want a reserved seat or what, but I've got a lot of details in the show notes as to what works with what. Now, I would have taken Fly2Get if it was the most if it was the next train coming. Who cares? It doesn't really matter. And kids are free on Fly2Get. They're sort of free on VY. It's a big mess. And there's a lot of things that didn't come up in research that I had to just learn on the ground. The Fly2Get train is nice too because it's, I think, a little more integrated into the airport. You can like print your baggage tags on the train, and there's just a lot less people on that train too because you travel to Europe, Robert, and all of a sudden everyone's focused on like that individual last dollar sometimes. And it's like, you're Fly2Get? Why would you do that? And why would you pay for the kids? You can just get the kids on. No one will charge you. Who cares? Say you're a senior. I'm like, all these people having these conversations with me. I'm like, are you guys serious? Like, it's $12. Like, I don't need to game the system in Oslo for, what am I going to say, $4 and say I'm in military? And then what? Like, none of this I'm serious. People were having this conversation with me all over the country, Robert. Like, what you do is you just say, and I'm like,
these are locals recommending this to you?
Locals, Robert, locals recommending this, yes. They're like, why are you buying a ticket on the trolley cars? Just jump on the trolley cars. And I'm like, well, I want to support the system. And they looked at me like I'm nuts. Like, what do you do? No one's ever going to check your ticket on the trolley cars. Like, what? There were train inspectors on this VY train from the airport, and varying amounts of how much they cared about whether you had a ticket or not. I mean, it just showed them the app. You can pay right in the app. There's a really good app called the Router app, and that's great for all the trains in the city and all the transit and buses and all of that. And you can use it to get on a VY train, but you can't use it to get on the Fly2Get. And the tickets are right in there, but the guy just literally looks at my phone, and I could have bought anything.
Just show me your home screen.
Yeah, but the trains are really, really convenient because they drop you right at Oslo Central Station. And Robert, that is one of those like great train stations. It really is. There's 2 big halls full of restaurants, sit-down restaurants with really beautifully like just the architecture, right? The architecture alone in this station. I could sit and look at all of these restaurants and take photos of all these areas. Then to the left, you walk, you've got a 4 or 5 story mall. Then you cross the street, you've got another like 6-story mall. And the malls in Norway, man, really just wide open. You know, they got like an atrium kind of look. The top is all glass, getting all this sunlight in. And, you know, we're just walking around this train station like, wow. Like, you know, I wish we didn't have all our luggage. We could just explore this train station right now. But, you know, we've got to check into our hotel. And so we're at that Clarion hotel. And I'm going to be really careful, Robert. I'm going to call it what it actually is. It's the Clarion, the hub, but it's really a strawberry hotel. Do you know anything about strawberry in Nordic countries?
I don't. I'm looking at the map here. I mean, first of all, like you said, the famous question of what's the best way to get to from the airport to, you know, city center, and, you know, not knowing what the situation is with water and trains. And, you know, I was practically riding off trains for the entirety of your trip. How should I know that whether you could take a train? I see the train routes swirling all over the place, but then getting into, I see the Clarion Hotel Oslo and the layout of the space. And you can't even tell on Google Map. You can see where the water is, of course, but you can't tell whether there's a mountain behind you or something like that, or whether you have to take an incline train or something to get from point A to point B. So that question of what's the best way to get there becomes even more complicated than just dollars. You know, it's like, oh no, nobody does that. You take the boat, you know, or you take the train to get. It wouldn't be viable to have a car do that. Like, just infinite number of options here. But I wonder if I'm even in the city center, because you're staying in a Clarion hotel. And if I look around here on the map, I see all kinds of choice hotels. Are choice hotels really as big in Oslo and Scandinavia as they're legendary, as they're rumored to be here in the States?
Apparently, back in 1994, there was an agreement to use the name Choice, Clarion, and I think Quality. And they created a company called Nordic Choice Hotels or something like that. It's almost as if a parallel universe exists in Scandinavia, because my wife was like, we're staying at a Clarion hotel, really? Like, and I was like, look, it's two nights, you know, like if it's awful, it looks okay online, you know? And, you know, she's like really skeptical of all my schemes and scams and stuff. And she's like, you're telling me that you booked this for $80, you know, like, because, you know, you transfer thank you points to Choice. If you have a Strata Premier, you actually get 2 choice points for 1 thank you point. So you've got this room that approaches $300 a night that you can book for 8,000 thank you points, which is like a tremendous redemption. But again, I'm skeptical too. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So it really is like a parallel universe where this Nordic Choice Hotels built out all these hotels all over the country. Everything from, you know, really like low-end hotels to really like mid to high-end hotels, and used the names that they were allowed to use. And this system grew over the last 30 years. And about, I don't know, a couple years ago, they decided we don't even want to call ourselves Choice Hotels anymore, because they've expanded beyond that into an even higher level of hotels that are just named whatever they want to name them. So now they've gone with this name Strawberry. So Strawberry hotels are really nice hotels, Robert. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, they're in great locations. Like you're looking at that Clarion Oslo hotel. That actually hotel is in the train station.
Oh yeah, it looks like
I'm across the street from the train station at the Hub, which is a 2019 build out. So again, newer is better. I mean, this hotel, you know, they built it in 2019. Who's staying there in 2020 or 2021? Probably no one. So it's had just a couple years of, you know, like being alive as a hotel. And you walk in, the lobby is beautiful. It's got this really nice archway, kind of like a modern archway. It's got this wall of televisions, like a seamless wall of televisions that envelope the elevators. And it just changes from cherry blossoms to kind of like snow to whatever. And the kids just, they're like, what is this? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. I was expecting a Clarion hotel, and I got a Strawberry hotel instead. And so everyone was really pleased. We booked a family room, and that limited my options. You know, I don't like, and I'm sure I could have in hindsight, snuck kids in the room. You and I have talked so much about this, right? Like the occupancy rates in Europe. And so there were only a few hotels that would take choice points and book into family size rooms, and the Hub was one of them. And I just, you know, by default, it worked out really well. The room was probably around 280 square feet, this family room. And when we checked in, they had already pulled out the sofa bed and made it for the kids. And, you know, I really appreciate that. Sometimes I get these rooms And like you get in and you go, well, where are the kids sleeping? Oh, that's the sofa. Like,
Yeah.
But this was all set. They had like a little kind of like carved out nook where the kids were sleeping and you couldn't see them or hear them. But, by the end of it, we said, no, I think we're going to try connecting rooms. And I talked to them at the end when I checked out. I said, I'll be back in a week because we're coming back to Oslo. I said, I'm booked in a family room and I'd like to change that to 2 connecting rooms. Can you do that? And the agent kind of checked on the computer a little bit and he said, okay, I understand what you're trying to say. He said, I think we can do that. You booked the family room. It'll be a little bit more, but I think we can do it. And I think and I know what he was doing, Robert. He was going to take the value of the family room and apply it to 2 regular rooms and then just charge me the difference. Right? And so let's say the regular room's like $250 and the family room's like, I don't know, $350. He's going to give me credit for that and charge me another $150 for the second room. But I told him like, no, I'll just book another room. I mean, I got all these points.
Yeah.
Like, and he kind of looked at me like, huh? Why would you do that? I'm offering to, give you value here. And, but he put in the computer. He said, I'll put in the computer. We want connecting rooms. And I said, okay, well, I'll see you in a week. And off we go. Right. And so I don't want to like gloss over Oslo. There were a lot of things that I read or heard that I didn't agree with. And one of those things was like, you got to get out of Oslo. Don't spend more than a day or 2 there, Robert.
Really?
I had heard that almost universally.
Huh.
And look, compared to the landscapes and the fjords and the areas that we went to after Oslo, sure. If you're looking for, really beautiful waters and you want to get out on the water and see the fjords and all that, no. All right, you can do an Oslo fjord tour. We did it. It's nothing compared to the rest of the country. But that city is an amazing world city, Robert, and it's super easy to get around. The downtown area is like San Francisco size, right? Like, so what, maybe like 3 miles on all sides, so 9 square miles. You can get around from one side to the other in like 10 minutes. And there's, trains and trams, and we never touched the subway. And there's just so many modes of getting around. I didn't see anybody driving. That's the other thing. Like, I don't know how I would drive in that city. I don't know how the roads work. I would probably run into a tram. I don't know, but there were taxis, and I was gonna take a taxi at some point, but I went like, look, the wait for the taxi is longer than the wait for walking across the street and hopping on the streetcar, and the streetcar takes you to wherever you want to go.
Wow.
We got pretty far out. We went to the Fram Museum, which is, again, you can get there on a boat across the water, but we ended up taking the more scenic route, and it takes you by National Theater and some other things, and it gets kind of rural really quick. Like, you make this right turn to go to the Fram and you're like, wow, there's no high-rise buildings anymore, just houses with yards and like kind of like suburban looking area really fast out of the city. But I don't want to like say you got to get out of Oslo right away. I mean, we spent 5 days there. We all wanted more time in Oslo at the end of the trip.
Wow, that's great.
I didn't mention the breakfast at this hotel, but the breakfast at this hotel was phenomenal, Robert. I mean, it is included in every single room, and normally when that's true, you'd think like, okay, like continental breakfast, right? No. Hot food, one food station of all different, cereals and yogurts and all of that stuff, one station of all fruits and vegetables, one crepe making station where they had a person making crepes and omelets, and every single person in this hotel, probably 1,000 people are eating breakfast at this place, and they're constantly bringing out new plates and constantly cleaning everything. And that hotel blew my wife away. I was like, what do you think? Was that like a Westin? She goes, no, that was better than a Westin.
Wow.
Wow.
It's almost like, the 7-Eleven analogy, right? I think of it as being an American brand, and then you go off internationally. There's some licensing deal 50 years ago that made it better in a foreign environment than it is here. Could Choice Hotels learn a lot from what they're doing in Scandinavia and actually make the properties here in the United States nice? That'd be nice.
I don't think that's possible at all. They should just go with strawberry and call it strawberry over here or something. Start over.
I think there's deeper issues in the American hospitality industry, as we've been talking about. A lot of very subpar lodging experiences compared to what you get internationally. And sounds like Norway is indeed an example of how things are better internationally for your median hotel.
That's true. Yep, that is so true. And then, because the other thing is, and we'll talk about it later, you got like 20 hours of daylight or more in Oslo in the summer. No one is going to sleep at 8 o'clock at night. Things are just starting to happen. We had dinner like the first day we were there. We had this whole day, long day. Went to the Fram and we did this tour, boat tour of the fjords, and And we go, well, it's 8:00. We should probably eat dinner. We go to this fantastic Japanese restaurant. We come out. They're just getting ready. They've set up like this giant TV to watch the, football finals, the Euro Cup finals or whatever it was. And the city's just alive. And it's like 9:30 at night. And it's so bright out. And it's just, I don't think it's worth just skipping. I think there's a lot there. There are so many museums and so many things to do, and there's art everywhere and culture everywhere in that city. Really, really fantastic city, Robert. I mean, like if you took Paris and compressed it in size or something like that.
Oh,
that's what it feels like.
That's a big endorsement. And from the pictures you shared, maybe include some more in the show notes as well. Just look like just a very sophisticated and kind of what I would imagine in some ways, but not in other ways. I mean, let's talk about the food. I hear there's going to be a lot of pickled herring on rye. I hear there's just going to be tons of fish for days, and there's going to be maybe some reindeer thrown in there. But what you were showing me was not that. It seemed to be, and I'd be interested in whether this was just in the bigger cities or elsewhere. You seem to have your pick of any international food you wanted.
Yeah. World food. I mean, world food in Oslo. This is another one of those things where I read, and I don't know if people I don't know what they were doing when they were talking about this, but they said, the food is tough, and, you got to like seafood, and you got to, really like, there's like reindeer sausages and really limited options, and, this national plate that they make with the shank, and I'm sure all that stuff existed, but I never even looked for it because that's not what I'm there. I don't want to slight Norwegian food, Robert, but I did a search. In Southern California, there are 0 Norwegian restaurants.
So you go there, you love this place, you can't come back and have the food, right? You have like dozens of Hawaiian restaurants, but the Norwegian food just hasn't translated to the LA market, I guess.
From what I've read from Norwegians, they agree the food is kind of bland and not all that great, and it hasn't transited out, and instead other foods have made it into Oslo, and that's what we did. We had Lebanese and Brazilian, and whatever you want is in that city. Vietnamese, and there's some food halls. There's 2 really cool food halls. One is near the Oslo Opera House, and one is a little bit on the other side of the city. And, they've got like empanadas and pho and, Korean fried chicken, and just all these little things in this food hall, just like a food hall here in Southern California. And, everybody can get what they want. And so the food was another one of those like unbelievably missed explanations. People were saying it's going to be awful, you're going to have trouble. We get all the way out into Lofoten, we're hanging off the edge of the world, and there's a Thai food place right there and a lot of sushi, and I don't necessarily think that everybody's okay with those options, but there's burgers and fries and fish and chips and pretty much in every restaurant, and they've got a lot of tourists coming into these areas, and the food is representative of those people, and so it was great. The kids had no trouble eating. I felt like an idiot, Robert. I brought all these snacks for them and all this stuff.
I'm tired of herring. Give me some snacks.
Yeah, like we're at the supermarket. My son's like, I want edamame. And I go, they're not going to have edamame. Oh, yeah, it's right here. Okay. Like giant bags of frozen edamame, just like I'm at home. A lot of ways it surprised me. And I don't know if that was me doing like low amounts of research, but, I did a lot of research into the transiting, because that's the thing that I was really nervous about. And then on the ground, I figured, look, people will help us. Tour guides will tell us where to go and what to do, or my wife is really good at this. But those first 2 days in Oslo, we just were like a whirlwind, and I'm like, wow, this is great. The only thing I think that's a negative, Robert, I assumed it would have a great like beer and wine scene because it's in Europe, right? But apparently Norway and Iceland, I think, are 2 of the countries with like the highest taxes on beer and wine and alcohol, and really like aggressive, trying to make it so that people drink less for public health reasons and safety reasons and things like that. And the beer was just awful. I mean, just really like, Robert, it's like people brewed beer and then randomly slapped labels on them. Like, we'll call that a tropical IPA. Yeah, let's call it that. And, we'll call this a Pilsner. Well, that's not a Pilsner. What are you doing? Like, so I'm sure like local tastes are enjoying the beers because they're there and there's lots of beer. But the other thing is there's like a monopoly on wine and basically any sales of alcohol. And literally the name of the store translates to wine monopoly. That's the name of the store, like Vin Monopolat, right? And so like we're dealing with this like, bad beer, and we really don't know what's going on, and we're ordering drinks at restaurants without any problems. And then we're in Tromso. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but my kids are playing in this playground. I walk inside this mall, and I see this store that looks like a Bevmo. And I have no idea what this monopoly is about or anything. I just run outside and I tell my wife, I go, there's like a legitimate store here that sells wine. Like it's like a Bevmo in Tromso. And so we go in there and, people say the prices are really high. I didn't think so, Robert. I think I sent some photos for comparison and, everything's got all the taxes in. And so I thought the food was reasonably priced. I thought that the wine was reasonably priced. You could get a decent bottle of wine there in that store. You couldn't get it anywhere else, but, you just get a couple good bottles of wine there. There were also some really terrible wines in that store, right? From places I didn't even know made wine.
Oh, really? It's tricky. Japan is pretty weak in wine as well. And sometimes you just go places and you're like, I'm not going to make this the wine trip, or, if the beer is not so good. And maybe that's even said for the food here. Like if you're just weren't feeling it, you weren't excited about exploring. I'm sure you had a couple of dishes, gave it a try, but I think it could be a mistake to try to go to a place and eat only that local currency if you're just not on board with it. Don't beat yourself up about eating the food that you want, because this is 2 weeks out of your life, right? Try the local stuff. If it doesn't appeal to you and they have other options, don't feel bad about getting empanadas in Norway. I think it's just okay.
I agree. It never became a real issue, but I think it is, again, it's overblown, right? Like, oh, it's really expensive and hard to find food and alcohol there. And I think it's overblown.
So wait, a couple of foundational questions maybe I should have gotten to earlier. English, is that the primary language that people are interacting with there? Or do you have to ask if people speak English, or is what's going on there?
Yeah, I never had to ask. It seems like it's the de facto either one and a half pop like language, not even the second language. It's like almost into the first language. And so every single person that I came across spoke English. And my wife had said that I think you learn it in grade school there.
Yeah.
You just do.
Yeah.
If you want to work there, I think you need to know Norwegian, and so everything is in both. It felt like if you were French and you went to Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about the currency? It's kroners, or what is it? What do they call it?
Yeah. Norwegian kroners.
Is that a pretty straightforward math to do in your head? And is there a good or bad exchange rate? Or was it hard to tell at the end of the day because you're buying a meal and you pay something and it seems like about the same as here? Or what's the upshot on the exchange rate?
Like 100 kroner would be like $9.20.
So you lop off a digit and you pretty much have dollars? Yeah.
Yeah, so, you see something on a menu, it's 21 or 210 kroner or something like that for a dish. That seemed to be about where the dishes were, like 210 kroner, 195 kroner. In my head, I'm thinking that's $21, $19.50. And it ends up being a little lower than that. But, I'm tipping a little bit on top of that. I mean, not a big tipping country, but, the credit card machines are all asking, how much extra tip would you like to put in? Mm-hmm. And apparently on the Norway subreddit, there's a lot of anger from Norwegians about tipping. But as an American, like, I'm not trying to wade into the international conflict of tipping versus not tipping. It's like, look, you did a service for me, and I'd like to just say thank you. And so my tips were ending up to be about 50 kroner. I would just add 50 kroner, which is like, $4.50. And I think that's, very low compared to here. But again, the pricing is all inclusive because it's Europe, right? So that 210 kroner is 210 kroner. There's no tax on top of that. There's nothing else on top of that. We were just dividing by 10.
Yeah.
And then you end up kind of like with a happy, like a little bit less at the end of it all. And I could have gotten by with zero cash. We had a show where we talked about ATMs and all of that stuff, Robert. It was all tap to pay. Every single place it was tap to pay. The only time I used cash was we went on like 4 tours and I wanted to have a little bit of cash to tip the boat crew and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so I went to one ATM. I took out, I think, $40 worth of kroner, 500 kroner or something like that. And just
that's interesting. They're not on the euro. I guess that should have been obvious to me when I said kroners, but they have their own bills and coins that are unique to just Norway or other Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, it says Norwegian kroner. I think the other countries do use other kroner.
Wow.
I'm not a total Scandinavian buff here, but
you have to go back.
It felt, it felt like there were a lot of stores that just didn't even want cash.
Yeah.
It'd say no cash. I thought the money was interesting. My kids really enjoy foreign money, so if I'm being honest, part of why I went to that ATM was also to get some foreign money so they could see what it looked like. And there's a salmon on the 200 kroner, like that. That's how important salmon is to the country, and coastal country, a lot of fishing. But I did no research, right, Robert? I mean, what am I going to do if I don't like the exchange rate? Like, what am I going to do, right? Like, not eat?
I'll show you.
So I got there, and I kind of, I didn't know what pricing was. I had heard people say, oh, it's very expensive. And I'd been to Switzerland before. I know expensive, Robert, but this was not Switzerland. Yeah. I mean, it might have looked like Switzerland, but it was not Switzerland level expensive. And, even if it was, there are so many different options and so many ways to make it work. My family is not a sandwich eating family, just in general. We don't eat a lot of bread. But you could walk into any supermarket. There were supermarkets everywhere. And there was tons of prepared food, deli section, sushi, you can grab and go. And so you could, if you had a big family or you're looking to save some money on a trip like this, you could have substituted one meal with something like that. We ended up not doing that. We had Airbnbs. We ended up cooking a little bit for one of our ways to make things flex a little and just save time too. But travel happens at any budget level because there are people that are on like shoestring budgets. You meet them all the time when you're on a trip, and they're like, yeah, I'm here, I'm staying at this thing or whatever. I'm staying with a friend and I don't have a car. And you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting, but it's not, I would say if you want to go to Norway, don't make the cost of things be the reason you don't go, because there's always a way to make it work.
Yeah. So Oslo's the capital. That's where you landed, down south. And then you have this big, long, vertical country with, of course, a bunch of fjords and stuff. I am very interested to hear about the fjord tours and such, but what's your next destination and how'd you get there?
Yeah, the next destination is Tromso. Again, that's that like northern capital. And I think it's like 68 or 69 degrees north latitude.
Way up there, yeah.
Way up there. You're way into the Arctic Circle, And if you were driving it, or if you're trying, there is no train. If you're driving it, it's like you drive into Sweden, I think, and it's like a 25-hour drive. It's well, wow. It's like, I don't know, maybe 1,000 miles. 1,000 miles.
I think I'm getting into some issues with Mercator projection here. I'm having a hard time figuring out how big of a country Norway is on a flat Google map. But maybe you could tell me by telling us how far the flight was from Oslo to Tromso.
The flight from Oslo to Tromso was almost as long as the flight from Paris to Oslo.
Wow.
So you've got this really vertical country. And so we have to get to the airport, and we have to get back to the airport. And I'll say getting from the airport to the hotel was not seamless the first time. By the end of this trip, we're pros, Robert, right? But the first time, we're on the wrong track. First of all, there's 4 tracks, right? And so, I just figure like, okay, we'll walk down this escalator and then we'll figure out where we're going. No, the escalator's tied to one specific track or maybe 2 tracks. We're on the wrong track. We missed the train. It's like, okay, so I'm like, I cannot miss this flight to Tromso because I'm booked on Norwegian Air Shuttle, which is like the only last vestige of this Norwegian carrier that I mentioned at the beginning of this show. And the ticket was like booked with these crazy bank points and all of this. And I'm like, if we miss this, there's no way they're going to reaccommodate us. And, you got to pay for everything. You pay for the seat. You pay for everything, right? And so the flight's at 10:30, and I'm thinking like, okay, breakfast at the hotel starts at 7, and I'm thinking like, okay, we got to get out of the hotel. We got to get to the train. It could be 15 or 20 minutes waiting for a train, if the train had just left. And that's one of those things with kids where like, Google will say like in 6 minutes the train leaves and it's only a 3-minute walk to the train. Forget it. We're not going to make that.
Get the next one.
I know it, right? Like a normal able-bodied person, you're fine. But I get to the point now. I mean, that happened a lot in Japan, where I just look at something like that and I go, no, it's not going to happen. We're gonna start walking across the street and my son's going to go, I got to go to the bathroom or something. And it's like, all right, well, we're going to miss that train. So I'm thinking in my head like, okay, maybe we get on a 7:45 train or an 8 o'clock train. That means we get off the train at like 8:25, 8:30. We got to check bags, and I go, we're checking all these bags. I'm not carrying any of this stuff. We check the bags, and I'm starting to get a little nervous, right? Because I'm thinking like I don't know how this airport works. I'm assuming it's not that big of an airport, but we ended up doing all of that stuff really quickly, and we had an issue with checking one of the bags. I had to wait in a line and travel through. Their family security checkpoint was relatively quick, but the flight was like 20 minutes delayed. So we ended up spending about an hour at the airport. And, we get on this Norwegian flight, and Robert, they have boarded planes. They are like the masters of boarding planes over there. Norwegian, this flight is supposed to take off at 10:30. It lands at 10:45, right? The incoming flight lands at 10:45, and we take off at like 11:10.
Wow.
And I'm like, They offloaded everyone, then got all of us on the plane and took off in less time than it took Air France to board one flight. It's like, and then on the way back, same thing. I mean, really, really quick boarding. They have front and back. They board both sides of the plane. They whatever your boarding pass is, and then they have like they have you booked into different categories, and category C are the people that don't have access to overhead cabins, because you can buy a ticket that doesn't even let you have a carry-on bag.
Oh wow, yeah.
And so, people are just getting on and throwing their bags in and sitting down, and everybody seems to know the drill. And flight was 2 hours, really uneventful. I thought it was fine. Yeah, and everyone seems to know how this Norwegian carrier works. The planes were rather old, I would say, so they've been doing this for a long time. The other option would have been this Widerøe carrier that has a lot of turboprop planes, flies into some of the smaller places. I went with Norwegian as a single flight. We could do a whole show on getting from Oslo to Tromso to Lofoten and how to do it. And I think we'll talk a little bit about how it works here, but I want to talk about Tromso because that's another one of these cities, Robert. It's crazy. You land on this little island. It's super tiny.
It's tiny. It's tiny in the middle. How'd you pick this? I mean, I can get zoomed in pretty tight on northern Norway, and it doesn't really, the font isn't any bigger. That's why I go off the population size. It looks like it's a small fonted city. How did you pick it?
Well, it's the third largest, I think, or fourth largest city in the Arctic Circle. And I was really into that idea. My wife was like, let's get way up in the north. And I was like, okay. She didn't want to go to Bergen. And apparently there's a lot of people in certain parts of the south of the country, like really popular, busy time in the summer to go there. But she said, let's get up there. It looks really nice. And then it's close to the Lofoten Islands, or close enough to the Lofoten Islands. We could probably just take a flight over there. And, it's the northern capital. It's very popular. I mean, I'm not saying it's like a hidden gem or anything like that, Robert. It's, there's stuff with the name Tromso printed on it in the souvenir shops, and they got souvenir shops on every corner. It's a very popular tourist destination, but people do live there. And it's this little island, like sitting in the ocean with bridges connecting it and a tunnel. And one of the bridges was not open, so we had to take the tunnel most of the times. And we stayed a little outside of the city. And you can stay in the city. I mean, there's like 2 Clarion hotels, 3 Clarion, I don't know, tons of Strawberry hotels in that city. And then there's like a Radisson Blu, and I'm sure there's other hotels there as well. But we got out of the main island, and we were on the coast, kind of overlooking the island, in an Airbnb that was like totally Norwegian, super Scandinavian, like architecture, really minimal looking inside, really, really nice place with a really weird check-in process, Robert.
Oh, well,
have I told you about this?
The pictures look fabulous. You got to put those in the notes too. But yeah, tell me about the check-in process.
It was the purest Airbnb experience, Robert. It literally was, they are going on vacation and want to rent their house out while they're on vacation so that they can go on vacation to someone else's house.
Wow. That's the way it's supposed to work, I think. I mean, going back to the holiday movie, home exchange, London to LA. But so the only thing missing here is that they're not going to stay at your house. They're going to stay at somebody else's house. But the property looks so utterly local. I mean, it looked exactly what you would, I don't know what I would expect a house up north look like. I frankly would have expected it to be a little bit more rustic, more cabin-like. But it was like the best of IKEA, like a high-end IKEA or something like that, set out over over a lake. It had kind of a lake vibe to it, but I guess it's the ocean at that point, or just beautiful views.
Yeah, but the ocean is so still because these fjords have so many like pieces of land blocking them that it's just completely flat. There's no waves, there's no ripples even. You can just see this like giant mountain reflecting in the water too. And then it never got dark, so it was like eternal sunshine, which up in the northern, in Oslo you have a couple hours where it'll get dark. But in Tromso, it's 100% midnight sun while we're there. So you look online, it says sunset, and then it just says dash. Like, no, it doesn't set. 24 hours of daylight.
Wait, I was watching, what was it, Eugene Levy up in northern Sweden, maybe? And he was talking about the blackout shades weren't blacked out enough for him. Did your place look like it just had all windows, and so you just got to deal with it?
Robert, you know what? Here's the thing, right? In summer, it was, we're in the Arctic Circle. Look, I'm not trying to wade into another like cultural argument, but clearly weather is warmer than it might have been when they planned on building houses in northern Norway. And, they're not putting air conditioning in. And, I mean, one day it was 82.
Ooh.
So the best blackout shades in the world aren't going to work when you need to open every window in the house to get any kind of air.
Oh, yeah.
You're in a greenhouse. That's the other thing. They build this house for the 9 months a year when it's freezing outside. So it's all windows, an entire glass house to warm itself up.
Oh,
and
wow.
in the summer, we're opening every window, and the blackout curtains don't do anything. So it's eye masks, really, more than anything.
Oh, wow.
That are going to do it. But I'm like panic waking up, going like, oh my God, did we miss the boat? And it's 1:30 in the morning, bright as day.
Yeah.
Then I go back to sleep, and I wake up 4 hours later, 5 a.m. I'm like, what time is it? Oh, it's 5 a.m. Oh, well, it looks exactly the same as it looked at 1:30 a.m.
That's pretty trippy. I mean, you put it all together, the jet lag plus the time shift plus the 24-hour a day sun. I mean, you're getting to something exotic here. This is why we travel. This is fun.
It was really, I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing, because that's another thing. Like everyone said, oh, it's going to be really difficult, and the midnight sun messes with you, and the blackout curtains. Robert, it was a complete feature, not a bug. It was a feature. It's 8 o'clock at night. My wife looks at me. She goes, why don't we go on the hike out in the back through the forest?
Yeah.
And I go like, are you, what? Oh, it's never going to get dark. We'll always see the water, so we'll know where we're going. Yeah, let's do it.
Wow.
And so at 8:30 at night, 9:30, we're hiking till 10 o'clock at night with the kids. And we got so much done because the days were so long that it's like you wake up, normal hour maybe at 7 or something like that. You do all this stuff, then you have lunch, then you go, we got a whole 10 hours of daylight ahead of us, or an unlimited number of daylight hours ahead of us. And so we're up till 11 or 12 o'clock at night when usually we go to bed really early.
Yeah.
And the kids were even up a lot later. So it helped. It's like you're packing more stuff into each day because there's more daylight. And it was nice. I liked it.
No, a couple things. I mean, around here, we just get so much more done in the summer because if it's dark, snowing at 4:30, the motivation to get out and do something is much lower. Summer, you do more. Second thing is just thinking about destinations and talking about weather and whether it's a good time to go someplace when it's hot, it's cold, whatever it is. It's definitely the time to go here in the summer. I think it's pretty great. I mean, a lot of times people just go to Europe in the summer because that's what you do. You take a European vacation, but then you get there and it's 100 degrees. And you're like, this is hotter than I wanted it to be. So pretty great time to go to Norway, I would say, right? I mean, when else are you going to go? Like more spring or fall or something like that? But it seems like it's pretty much ideal.
Yeah, I thought it was ideal. But apparently it's the low season, and especially in Tromso, it's the low season. I mean, there were like no one on our tours, and everyone kept saying like, oh, this is the low season. Most people come in spring to ski or in the winter for the northern lights, and really summer, we're all going other places.
Oh, wow.
And I went like, this, for me, this is perfect, Robert. It never got too hot. The one day it was like 82. Mostly it's like 70. Nice breezes, tons of daylight. Easy to drive because there's no weather conditions on the roads. So for me, maybe I'm a counter traveler that goes against when people are in places. I like being around no one. But yeah, I'm summer in northern Norway. Wow, fantastic! Really, just the time to go.
That sounds like it. Well, did you finish your story about what was unique about the check-in to the place? Did you want to talk about that?
Oh, I didn't. But Airbnb does this like translate automatically. And so number one, I think they thought I spoke Norwegian. Number two, they kept saying like, well, when are you coming? What time will you be checking in? And, I'm so hardwired into like the Airbnb as a business. I thought they were like trying to make sure I'm not checking in early or something. I'm usually the one going like, hey, we landed a little early. I know check-in's at 3, but can we check in at 2? And, I'm like, well, we landed at 1. Is 3 o'clock too early? And they're like, 3 o'clock, perfect. We'll see you then. And I'm like, who's we? But we finally get there. And they literally wanted to like show us the house, show us all around, go over everything with us, and then like wish us well and wave us off. And then when we left, they wanted to do the same thing. They wanted to come and say goodbye and kind of check in, and almost like a hotel, which I don't know if that's what everybody in that area is doing or they're new to it all. But my wife was like, that was weird, right? I was like, yeah, it was kind of weird. Yeah.
Was there stuff left in the house while they were away?
Yeah.
Like the closets had their clothing in it, for example.
I didn't open the closets. They kind of said like, okay, this area is like off limits here. Please don't go in that area. But the place was completely empty. Like there were no pictures on the walls of people. It didn't feel like you're in someone's house. It was fully stocked for us. And but yeah, all their stuff was somewhere in this house. Which that normally happens. There's usually a locked cabinet, right? Like you rent an Airbnb,
maybe, yeah,
and there's a locked cabinet, and they'll say like private owner storage, and that's all,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's tricky, right? Like you say, Airbnb as a business, and it's gotten so impersonal. Rental agencies running these, and
Yeah.
people are just doing it as a, it's not their vacation house. It's a investment property that they just rent out all the time, 24/7. And then so then you get something like this where it's a little bit more experimental and a little bit more personal, but then maybe it gets too personal because you're meeting the guy and he's like, how come we didn't clean this up and that up? It's like, it's tough to find that perfect balance.
Yeah, but speaking of cleaning, there's no cleaning fee, right? It's the pure experience. It's you want to rent the house, here's how much it is. There's no fees. There's no cleaning fees. And you know what happens when there's no cleaning fee, Robert? You feel like you need to keep it clean.
Yeah.
If someone charges you $400 for cleaning fee, you're going to go, I'm not cleaning up. That's your job. Yeah. And so it's this ultimate irony where if you don't include a cleaning fee, you probably get the place back in better condition. Yeah. Weird, but the check-in being so personal it really led to like a negative later in the trip, because I met with these people. I told them, we're going to Lofoten Islands next, and they went, well, how are you getting there? It says that magic question, right? How are you going to get there? And I typed it into Google Maps. It says drive this highway all the way down there, and the guy goes, yeah, you could do that, but I think you should probably consider the other route. The northern route that takes you to Senja, which is this beautiful island. In fact, that's where we're going on our vacation. And he goes, I'll tell you all about it. Here's what you do. You drive to Edinburgh, which is like 90 minutes away. You take the ferry from there to Senja. You drive through this beautiful island. It's the Caribbean of the Arctic. It's Hawaii of the Arctic. Everything's something
really
of the Arctic.
Wow.
Yeah, right? He's like, then you get on this other ferry, and that is the most beautiful ferry. It's an hour and a 40-minute ferry, and it takes you through these fjords, and it's just so amazing. And I'm like, okay, I'll consider it, but, I looked at it. It's a little longer as far as the time. He goes, yeah, but it's worth it. It's totally worth it. It shows up when you search Google Maps. I saw it. Anyways, that sets the stage for later in the trip. I'll talk more about that later. But let's talk about like the things to do in Tromso, right? Like the area is most of the year very cold. The water's very cold. But one of these cool things we did, Robert, is they have these floating. We saw them in Oslo too. Floating saunas, right? Like a sauna boat. You get on it. And you go out into the water and you sit in the sauna. It's like 180 degrees in the sauna. And then you jump in the water. And the water in Tromso was 51 degrees. And so very cold, like incredibly cold water. And, but it is really refreshing. And so I don't know how to like explain that. Apparently it's open all year round. People do this in the winter too, which is insane to me. The water's like 39 degrees in the winter or something like that. Yeah. And they're jumping into it. But, we said, we're here. We got to try this. And I'm glad we did. It was really a cool experience. We had the kids. So, I couldn't really relax too much. I plunged in, I think, 3 times. And just what a way to really energize yourself. And just, there was all these locals doing it too. And then we did a fjord tour, a fishing tour. There's a husky cafe, a dog cafe, like, cat cafes. Yeah. They have a dog cafe, and very popular, and a lot of dogs. The kids love dogs. We did that. That was it was okay. The outdoor stuff, Robert, I think it was 100 shows ago. I said, I want to go skiing. This is when I went to Breckenridge, right? The altitude's like 12,000 feet in Breckenridge, Colorado. And I said, that's too high. I want to go skiing at sea level. Robert, Norway is the place. It has skiing at sea level because it's so cold in the winter. They get so much snow in the winter, but you've got these mountains that back up right onto the water. Wow. And so these little towns have these ski resorts or little ski lifts, and it's like if you went back 80 years before all the big names bought up all the ski resorts in our country and in Canada and created these mega passes and these giant, it's like, you want to come here and go skiing? Yeah, there's like 3 different places where we ski. You want to ski in Lofoten Islands? There's 3 different places you ski there. And it's a local thing that people just know about and do. And I think that could be a really awesome spring trip up into that area. But it's tough to get to. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? Like from my house to Tromso is 14 hours, 16 hours of flying minimum. Plus you got to rent a car because you can't get around those areas without a car. And so I guess I should talk about the car rental. I rented an EV from Hertz, Robert, and I'm glad I rented that EV. One of the amazing parts about this for me was Hertz online said I was going to have a specific model of car, and that was the exact model I picked up. Have you ever had that happen?
No. No,
right?
even the representative car gets confusing because, like in Italy, they said we're going to get some model that I had no idea what it was, and I got some other car that I had no idea what it was. So their representative model didn't give me any clues as to what it was. But you asked for a Volkswagen, you got a Volkswagen.
Yeah, I wanted an EV. It said you're going to get a Volkswagen ID4, and that was exactly. It was even the color that it showed me online. That's probably a coincidence, but
that's bonkers.
Robert, the prices, rental cars in the area were really, really pricey when I first looked. I mean, really pricey, like over $1,000 for a week. And then I guess we can kind of get into getting to Lofoten, because the idea I had was like, okay, we'll go one way, right? We'll drive the car to Lofoten, drop it there, and then fly out to Oslo from one of the small airports in Lofoten. They wanted like double for that, like $2,000 for that. And I was like, this trip's starting to spiral. And then in my back of my mind, I'm hearing like, oh, the food's expensive, everything's expensive. And I'm thinking like, well, I got to cut some costs on this rental car here. There's going to be tolls, and there's going to be ferries, and there's going to be all of this other stuff. And so I originally was booked in a regular gas car, and I just got a kind of a decent rate. And then I did what we always do. Like about 2 or 3 weeks before the trip, I started searching again, and I found this EV option for like $520. I think it was about $520 for a week. And I thought, like, even if I have to pay for charging and pay for tolls and all this stuff, I probably should do this and just drive it both directions. I mean, if the option is $2,000 to drop the car one way, or $500 and I got to drive both ways, I think I'm going to do it. It's just too much of a represent too much of a savings. And then there are like all these other considerations. The airport in Lofoten is so small. The runway is so short. Can't even fly a plane from there to Tromso. You got to stop somewhere. Jeez. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to spend 8 hours one way or another, either sitting around airports and flying on these little dinky planes, or driving through the countryside. I might as well just do the drive. And I'm telling people I'm going to Lofoten, and a second person tells me, oh, you got to take the ferry. You're not taking the ferry? And then he mentions as well, he goes, you could even take the Hurtigruten. The Hurtigruten is like the way you should go. You 1:30 in the morning, you get on it, and then 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're there. And I'm like, that's 14 hours. Like, I'm trying to get there. I'm not trying to like. He goes, well, no, you take the ferries then. The ferries are great. Another person tells me to take the ferries, and we're getting ready to leave Tromso, and I look at my wife and I go, I think we should take the ferries. I think
enough people have said it at this point that you're going to do it.
Enough people have said it, right? Yeah, the guy even like drew me a map in one of the places. He goes, you take the south route, here's what's going to happen. You're going to spend a lot of money. You're going to eat terrible food. You're going to see nothing. It's going to be awful. You take this other route, you see everything. It's only 200 kilometers of driving. The ferry does most of it for you. Oh, I'm like, okay. So we get ready to check out. I get all the information on these ferries. I talk to the owner of the house, and I go, hey, we're going to do the ferry. We want to leave like around 8 a.m. The first ferry's at 10:45. It's about 90 minutes away. I want to give us plenty of time to catch it. He goes, okay, yeah, that sounds good, and then he comes to check us out, and I go, is it busy? He goes, I heard on the news it's very busy right now. I go, okay, so like, you think we'll be okay? We're going to get there like an hour before the ferry? He goes, maybe. And that's that like completely a Norwegian response, Robert. Everybody's so casual. Like California, we're really casual. They take it to the next level there. Maybe the amount of coastline and the amount of casuality, those are like completely like linked, because how casual they are and how much coastline they have. Maybe that's why. But I drive us the 90 minutes. We get to this ferry stop, which has nothing. I thought, there'll be something. Maybe the kids can do something. We'll be able to watch while they wait for the car to get loaded. The ferry, we're number 12 in line. The ferry, Robert, takes 25 cars. Okay. And I go, this is a pretty small ferry. And then these like tour buses start kind of creeping up on the side of us. And, and then I start looking behind me, and there's probably 50, 60 cars in line. And I go, well, all right, we're 12, we'll be okay. And they start letting the buses on first, even though they got there like right before the ferry showed up, I guess they have priority. And my wife gets mad. She goes, why are they letting them on? Why aren't they letting cars on? Imagine, I go, hey, look, we're 12. I think we'll be okay. We get on this ferry. There's plenty of room for, 10 more cars after us or something like that. I talked to the guy. I go, how many cars can fit? He goes, well, usually 25, 20, real casual, 27, but with 3 big buses, maybe only 18.
Ooh.
And I go, okay, well, hopefully there's no problems on the next ferry, but all right, we take this ferry, we get off. We're on this island, Robert, that is so beautiful. My wife's snapping pictures. We're stopping at lookout points. It's just like the way that we scheduled this trip, going from Oslo to Tromso to Lofoten, it's like really nice place, even nicer place, incredible place. And so I like the staging we did.
Yeah, I was gonna ask what drew you to Lofoten over Tromso? How does that get knowingly different before even going into it? What was about Lofoten Islands that drew you to it?
It looks like nothing I've ever seen. It's these islands that are connected with these bridges and tunnels, and the water is shallow and crystal clear because it's Arctic, and the views are just unbelievable. There are these hikes that take you to these lookout points where you can see forever, and no people, which I like. And it came up in our research over and over where people were saying, like, if you're going to go to the north, most people I think would choose one or the other because it's difficult, right? You go from Oslo to Lofoten and you get this unbelievable experience. You go from Oslo to Tromso, you get a little bit less unbelievable but a different experience. And we thought, like, okay, we're going to this area. We might as well try and do both of these things. And we all regret that we didn't have more time in all these places, but we really are happy that we tried to do both. Even with everything that's about to happen in this story, Robert, we're happy we did both. Yeah.
But you made the first ferry. I was worried. I was getting worried about that. The buses come in, they take off things. But there's a lot of people who didn't make that first ferry. And then how long do they have to wait for the next ferry?
Well, there's only 3 a day. So the next ferry was at like 1 o'clock. And the next
no
ferry,
services there.
But we need another ferry. And I'm thinking in my head, like, we're fine because, like, all the people that were on our ferry are probably going to the next ferry anyway. And how else are you going to get to this island? But the ferry we were just on, so we'll be all right, So we drive, but again, we're driving through this island of Senja. You could spend time there. I mean, that's a great place. In fact, like I said, the people who own our Airbnb, they said they were spending their vacation there. And then we get to the end of this road, and there's all these cars parked on the side of, like, just literally on the side of the road. And I'm like, this is interesting. Maybe they're, like, taking pictures. This really beautiful vista, And I drive around all of them, and I get to where the ferry picks you up. And there's nothing. Like, I say there's ferries here, and I'm assuming there would be, like, a ticket booth or someone who works for the ferry. Nothing. There's, like, a grocery store, and there's, like, a sign that says ferry, and that's it. So I park the car. I kind of, like, walk around a little. I assess the situation, and I notice that there's a parking lot with, like, 30 numbered spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 30, and there's cars just like one behind the other in these 30 parking spaces. And then at the end of parking space 30 is the beginning of this line of cars that I saw parked on the side of the road.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So I start going like, oh, man, I go, maybe this is like a bigger ferry. I don't know. But either way, we better get in line. So I drive back to the end of this line of cars and I park. And I have the most Norwegian conversation I've ever had in my life now, Robert, because I go to the guy in front of me. He's in a van. And his window's up, and I knock on the window, and I go, excuse me. And I say, is this the line for the ferry? And he goes, yeah. And I go, there's a lot of cars. He goes, it is a lot of cars. And I go, do you know how many people can fit on the ferry? He goes, I think it's 25 or 27 cars. Oof. And I look at him, and I go, 25 or 27 cars? Well, there's 30 cars parked up in the front there. And he goes, uh-huh. I go, there's probably like, I don't know how many cars are in this line. I haven't counted it yet. He goes, yeah, there are a lot of cars in this line. I go, yeah? I go, so we're not going to get on the next ferry? He goes, no. I go, well, what about the last ferry of the day? He goes, probably not that one either. And I'm like, you don't seem worried at all. What are you going to do if you don't get on that last ferry? He goes, we will sit here all night and maybe we will get out on the ferry in the morning.
Oh, dear.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so casual. Like, how are you? I don't understand it. I really, I'm like, you're going to sit, it's 1 o'clock right now. You're going to watch 2 ferries in the next 6 hours, then sleep here. And then at 8 o'clock in the morning, hopefully get on the 3rd ferry. I start walking. I count the cars. I get to like 60, 70 cars. And I'm like, forget it. I get back to the car. My wife already looked up a different route. She's like, there's a way off this island. Let's go. I'm like, all right, let's go. In hindsight, when everyone that lives there is telling you to do something, I started second guessing myself, and I went ahead and said I should do it. And I want to jump back to that like San Francisco to LA analogy, Robert, right? Like if you were up in San Francisco and you're from a completely different area and you said like, oh, we're going to drive down to LA, I bet a lot of people would be like, have you considered taking Highway 1? And you go like, no. And they'll go, oh yeah, you go through Carmel, you go through, you get to see the coastline. You can stop at like Big Sur. You have all this like really beautiful. Meanwhile, it's like 9 hours versus just taking the freeway and being there in 5 hours.
Right.
And that's, I think, the closest that I could come with why everyone was telling me to do this, because it's one of those like bucket list things. Like, you got to take this ferry. It's the most beautiful ferry in the country, and everyone's wanting to take this ferry once in their life. But I really just want to get to Lofoten. I don't really care about this. I took bad advice. Fortunately, again, there's midnight sun. It never got dark, so I wasn't worried, but it was raining. And, I'm driving like this circuitous route. I'm in an EV. It's one tank or one charge to get to Lofoten, but it's not when you take a, 40 or 50 mile detour and then another 40 or 50 miles back to get back on the regular road. So I have to stop somewhere. I have to charge. It all worked out. It was fine. But, man, the ride back, even my kids were like, that was so fast. I mean, we should have done that the way there. I'm like, yeah, even you, 9 and 5, you understand. Like, the journey is sometimes not the point. It's the destination. And so I should have stuck to just taking the route we thought we were going to take. And it was fine, Robert. There's waterfalls along the way. There's all kinds of beautiful things to view along the way. I don't know what those people who told me don't do it were talking about. Do it. It's a beautiful drive. The speed limits are rather slow in the whole country, and the drive is really twisty. So, look, if you have seasickness issues, you got to take a boat. That's not going to work. If you have car sickness issues, it's not going to work either. It's not the country for you if you have car sickness and seasickness issues. It's just not. You got to take a boat or a twisty ride anywhere you want to go.
Or a little prop plane with a short runway that you have to stick.
Right. Yeah. We were taking a tour in Lofoten of the fjord there, and the guy goes, see that's Fulver right there. That's the airport most of you guys probably wanted to fly into. He says the runway is like 900 meters long. And he says it's also got these amazingly strong crosswinds because of all the mountains on either side. He says it's the most harrowing landing place. Most people say you have to be the best pilot to land there, and you have to fly these really small planes. So the flights, and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm so glad I didn't do that.
Oh my goodness.
Again, a lot of bad information, between Tromso and Lofoten, there's no service, there's no gas, there's nowhere to eat. No, every 30, 40 minutes, there's somewhere to stop. It's also one tank of gas from Tromso to Lofoten. So I don't understand. Like, everybody made it sound like this treacherous drive along this really bad cliff. No. Like, there were a lot of places where maybe it wasn't even a 2-lane road. It was a 1.5-lane road. So much of, like, flashbacks to driving the Amalfi Coast, because there's just not a lot of room, and there were a lot of places like that where you're being passed on the left by a big bus, and you guys have to go really slow and navigate through those, areas. That's the part that's treacherous and hard to do. But the freeway between those two cities, no, it's just, you just drive it. It's super easy. That area, I'll put photos, Robert, and I'm glad we're having this as a no annual fee show. I can put like a full post together along with this. Just every day, the weather was perfect. We got really lucky. Everyone kept telling us this is like not normally the weather. It's usually pretty rainy or cloudy or whatever. Beautiful. I mean, just like no one there. You get in the car, you drive 30 minutes, you find your spot where there's no one, and just relax and just contemplate the end of the world, Robert. My favorite pastime when I'm on vacation,
Again, I got to encourage people to bust out the Google Maps, because I can see exactly what you're talking about. I don't think a reasonable person would look at a map and say that they're going to take that detour through there that you did, because you don't even see roads, but then you see a little dotted line, and I could see where that would be a bottleneck, and I could see what would be the obvious, more not direct, but non-ferry involved route for just getting there. So, wow, what an adventure. Ferries are weird, right? Ferries are like a train plus traffic plus you got to be there on time. You can't just say, hey, the ferry takes an hour, and then I only have to drive 2 hours, so I just zip on. You got to budget so much time and margin for it. But what you bumped into is like the mother of all margins. Like, not only do you need to stand in line for a day, what do you do? Just sit there in the car? There's no services there? That sounds pretty brutal.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know what people are doing there. You go to the website of the ferry, and it has like one sentence buried in the middle. It's like, this summer, we're seeing really like unprecedented demand for the ferries. Please give yourself appropriate amount of time. Like, just say, don't take the ferry. It's not working. It's not valuable transit for anyone, right? Like, call it what it is. And so I got someone who could have a conversation with me, and he goes, you want to know what the ferries are. He says the ferries are guaranteed service for people that live on these islands. He says it's part of our like government guarantee that if you ever had if you ever had a house on one of these islands and you live there, they have to connect you to the mainland. He says, so all these little islands have 3 times a day ferry service because by law they have to have 3 times a day ferry service. But it doesn't say how big the ferry has to be. It doesn't have to take cars. It can just, the ferries are big enough to take every person that wants to go on it. So he says, it's so expensive because all year round, every single day, they run 3 ferries to every island that has anybody living there, whether they're in their house or not. They stop at the island. And he says it's guaranteed service. And so people buy these houses on these remote islands knowing that they can get there, and they just put the car on the island, and then they come back and, back and forth on the ferry without their car. He says it's very expensive for the government, but something's got to change, Robert. They either need 20 ferries a day or they got to go like selling tickets ahead of time. I don't understand why they're not going to sell tickets ahead of time.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I think you see that here, getting over to Nantucket and things like that, and they just increase the price to the point where, only people who really, really want it get it. But you have a reservation, right? And so that does flatten a lot of things. I'm just thinking too about going up to the San Juan Islands in the Pacific Northwest, and just trying to figure these things out. Like I'll stay at home. I won't go do Cape Cod, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard or something like that, just because it's just too much. It's just too much. But when you're on vacation, you're forced to deal with these things because there's something on the other side. There's some, cool place that you've never seen that you want to get to. And being on vacation forces you to do that hard work. And you did some hard work to get there. So what was out the Lofoten Islands? Where did you stay there? Did you do another Airbnb? There sounds like a no hotel kind of game. What was it at the destination in Lofoten for lodging and activities?
Yeah, Svolvær is like the biggest city in that area. There are hotels there. I think that is a disappointing place if that's your final destination. And if you don't have a car, that is just not worth going, right? Getting into the airport and then getting, there's like a bus and you can do certain things. But that town looks like any other coastal town anywhere. And it's not until you pass that town does it get really breathtaking. That's like the beginning of where it really takes off, but that's halfway through the Lofoten Islands. I think you've got to get past that. And we looked at 2 different Airbnbs. One was on an island that had ferry service. And, the Airbnb host is like, oh, you just take the ferry and it's 3 times a day and you can take your car and everything. I'm so glad we didn't do that, Robert. I could imagine a world where we can't even get to our Airbnb. And I'm emailing the guy and he's probably like so casual, like, I know the ferries have been very busy this year. See you tomorrow or something. Like that didn't happen. We were 1 town over from Svolvær in an Airbnb, jumping off point to a couple really nice beaches, actually. And there's a small town that's really well known with this like football pitch that's like hanging off the ocean. I don't know if you've seen those photos of that one. But that was like a little town. It's so touristy. My wife wanted to go there. We had lunch there one day. Really, really touristy. And one of the things that I haven't mentioned on this, but one of the things that caught me completely off guard in the north of Norway is how much paid parking there is. There is only paid parking, and it's like everywhere. I'm in this little town, Svolvær. I'm getting ready to go on my fjord cruise, and I'm looking for parking, and there's this just paid lots everywhere, and the apps and all this stuff. And I probably spent more on parking than I spent on wine.
That's a
on
problem,
this trip, Robert.
That is a major problem.
And like the car seemed like such a deal at 7 days, but every day we're in Tromso, I'm paying $4 an hour to park the car, and I don't care. It's like I'm here. It's what I'm going to do. But of all the things people wrote about and all the reading I did and all the research, no one mentioned that a car represents like a $48 a day liability if you wanted to spend time in city centers with it.
There's city centers, but I'm trying to map it to what's normal here, right? Like when you get to more rural areas, even if they're touristy, even if they're jumping off point for taking a ferry or something like that, there typically is just ample parking and people kind of just park. So I think $4 an hour in an urban area is insane, but it is unusual to, I think, bump into like $50 a day parking for rural areas essentially.
I mean, there's all areas that you can park when you get out in the middle of nowhere. There's parking that's free, but it was just this unknown to me, like, oh man, I got to take care of this. Some of them had apps and some of them didn't, and the unfortunate part about the ones without the apps were you couldn't even add time. Like you just had to come back before it expired or after, right when it expired, and then re-up for more time. It's this like anchor where like I'm like, oh, well, we could probably explore the city some more, but in 20 minutes I got to get back over there, or I got to go back right now and put a couple more hours. Finally, you get to places where there's an app, and the app lets you put time from wherever you are, which is nice. It's almost refreshing. But why those other areas didn't have that, I don't know. But yeah, the parking situation was an unknown for me. And that small town with the football pitch, I mean, there were way too many people and not enough parking spaces there. So we got lucky. We found a parking space. We spent the afternoon there. So touristy. I mean, so touristy. But, you know, you're there. You're not going to not see the touristy places. And then, you know, right after that, I kind of cleansed myself by just getting out of there and going to this beach that had nobody. And, you know, the water's ice cold. It's not as cold as it was in Tromso because you've got the currents bringing warmer water. It's probably 61-degree water. And, you know, people are in there like it's the only beach they have. So I guess people get into it. But I got into my knees or basically just got in the water a little bit to cool off because it was a little bit warm those days. Yeah, I mean, I'm standing there and I'm like, this is the same earth I live on. And that's part of the cool part, I think, for me bringing my kids on these trips, Robert, is like we live in this city. You know, we have trees and we have landscaping and all that stuff, but this was like a real experience of what the earth looks like with no people and what it would be like if we didn't mess it up in certain areas. And so my kids just got this real opportunity to see for 50 miles in every direction that there's nothing around and that there's wide open areas, and this is a really big earth with a lot of different things and people, and those are the experiences that I like for them. And you know, they loved it. Like I said, we got back, and they were saying we would go back again.
One thing I wanted to ask about, I mean, I love all that, and it's just so different. Just even looking on a map, it looks different. We got to come back to the fjords, though, right? Because that, I think, is one of the iconic things to do there, and you did a couple of those, but you took one that was called a silent fjord tour, boat tour. What was silent about it? Was it like the quiet train, or like what was silent about it?
The boat itself. You know, we took 2 tours with the same company. Brim, I think, is the company. One was in Oslo, and that boat is completely electric. And the boat that we took in Lofoten is hybrid. So they get you to the fjord, then they turn off and just go electric, and you get to go through the fjord without any engine noise. I don't want to sound cynical, but I don't think that really mattered. You know, like it didn't really matter.
Were the fjords as incredible as I hoped? Like my vision is a very narrow waterway and huge mountains to either side of you, and maybe some snow up on top or something like.
Yep.
Was that there? Was that cool?
That was it. That's exactly it. You know, and the depth of the water in those areas. You know, that just really, really dark water, but clear. So you realize you're seeing down. You know, there were so many times where we drew these comparisons to like Lake Tahoe, for example. You know, that's a glacial lake, and the water there is incredibly clear. You can see down sometimes 50, 60 feet and really blue. And that blueness is there. And what's really unique, I think, is that there are no waves and really almost no currents because of all the natural breakwaters that happen from these islands and from all these fjords that are there. So you're sitting there, they cut the engine, and it's dead quiet. There's no waves. The water's like glass. You see this like crazy, you know, sheer cliff face, and then you see the reflection of it in the water too. And, you know, we saw eagles, we saw these penguin-type birds they have there, and, you know, jellyfish, and caught some fish when we went fishing, and it's just a completely different world. It's so, you know, there's nothing like it, Robert, here. And you can take a boat here, and you're always moving in the current, and there's nothing really to look at. And these cliff faces are just, I don't even know how they were made. You know, that's one thing they didn't get into, how all of this was geologically made. I would love to learn more about that. But there's so many fjords that, like, you could probably, I'm going to say this, you probably need to do 1 or 2 fjord tours, not all the fjord tours every day, you know, because the exploration allows you to drive around the fjords and see them from a vantage point that, like, you're on the tall bridge, or you're at the water's edge and you're looking up again across like a big fjord and seeing the other side of it. And there's just so many vantage points, so many different ways to see it. Getting out on the water is great, and the weather was so good that I'm glad we did it. But it's not the only way to see those fjords. You can hike to the top of them. I mean, they're just so much access too. Everything seems wide open, and you'd see all these people, with RVs, locals, Norwegians with their RVs, and they're parking on the side of the road and just like fishing off the, it's just, it's like if one of our really, really popular national parks, Yosemite was a chain of islands and was open to everyone, and there were no people to like overrun it. That's what it felt. I think it's a national park of theirs, and you've got access to all of it. And it's just, I got to put the photos, Robert, but the photos don't do it justice. That's the problem.
Yeah, just going back to the map here again, I've been scrolling around the whole time we've been talking. A couple things strike me. Initially you look at it and you think, oh, there's so many little islands, craggy shorelines and things like that. And the only thing I could think of that's similar that I've seen in the United States is in Maine. Just looking at a map, right? You see a lot of that. There's all these little inlets and things that make for a very beautiful scenery. And I can imagine that being a proxy for it. But it's so far north. Where you went is so far north.
Yeah.
If you draw a line east from New York, you bump into Portugal. If you go then up to London, which I always think in my head is kind of on the same latitude as New York, you're up in Newfoundland. And so then you get up to the base of Norway, and it's like you're in Greenland and very far north.
Yeah.
Hudson Bay, Northwest Passages practically. And then keep going a little further north and be up where you were. You were so far north of Iceland, north of just deep. You were way up there. Probably, I mean, I can't think of what other country you might conceivably visit that's that far up there. It's crazy. You were way up there, man.
Yeah, I think you can get into like Greenland, definitely, but nothing with people. The only other places that I looked at that had like cities up in that far north were in Russia. And I mean, I'm not going to Russia.
That's it, right? You can look at Alaska, you can get up that far, or Canada, of course. But when you do get up there, there's nothing up there. You'd have no problem getting on the ferry because there'd be no ferry, no line whatsoever.
Yeah, right. You get to some of these cities in Alaska that are coastal, and they're all on the southern coast of Alaska. The fact that they built these tunnels and bridges and roads into these areas is very unique, I think. And so I'm really glad we did that, because it represents an area in the world, like you're saying, Robert, that you can get up that far north and just drive around it and do whatever you want to do. And you almost forget. I had to Google it. I was like, are we still in the Arctic Circle when we were in Lofoten? And yeah, we are. And I'm like, this is incredible. Like, this is really like blowing my mind how far up we are. And then we drove back because we had to get back to Tromso because we had booked a nonstop from Tromso to Oslo because I had to get the car back. And I dropped the car off with nothing, Robert. I think I put in the show notes, right? I didn't have time to charge it. My Airbnbs on both sides had car chargers. Everybody's driving electric cars in Norway. It's just what they do. And so it was really, really convenient because every night I just plug in and have 100% battery the next day. But I didn't have time for that. And I wasn't going to stop and wait for it to charge because I'm not going to sit and wait. Even if it's 45 minutes, why am I going to just sit and wait 45 minutes for the car to charge? Hertz will charge it for me for $25 or something like that. So between the car charging and the tolls, because there are a lot of toll roads, I think I ended up spending like $70 in, tolls and charging and fees. And, the tolls, I did zero research, Robert. It's like, what am I going to do? Not drive certain roads because there's tolls on them? Like, I didn't do any research at all on them. And I got the receipt, and most of the tolls were under $1.50. And if you pay one toll for the next hour, you can drive any road and they won't charge you again. So, I mean, if you're driving all day, you might get hit with, 7 tolls for like a total of $10? Like, that's nothing. It's important to them because it pays for all the roads and things like that. But don't bother worrying about the tolls. They're very reasonable. I was always thinking there's gonna be a gotcha here. It's gonna be like a $92 toll to take like that ferry or something like that. And the ferry was $8. Like, So we get back to Tromso. We drop the car. We fly back on Norwegian. Again, a really, really easy flight. And by now we're pros getting into Oslo, Robert. I mean, we get to the right escalator, the right track, get that very next train, time it perfectly, get off, come back to the hotel. Hello, I'm here for my connecting rooms. And no, there's no connecting rooms, Robert. There's no. Yeah, she says. She goes, yeah, no. I go, what do you mean no? I talked to the guy. He put it in the computer. And she goes, yeah, no, he did put it in the computer, but one of my associates, we missed it, I think. At this point, it's like 10 o'clock at night. It's bright as daylight, but it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm tired. And this is one of those moments where you got to know when to fold. And fortunately, I was still booked in a family room. So I go, you know what, just give me my family room. We'll deal with this tomorrow. There's no benefit to having connecting rooms tonight when we're all just going to go in the room, fall asleep, and we have bedding for everyone right now. So let's just do that. And I think I sent you a message like some issue happened because I tried to book another room and it didn't go through. And I'm telling her like, no, I have 2 rooms. And I just, you know what, forget it. It doesn't matter. We'll deal with it tomorrow. So in the morning I go down and I talk to the person and I say, I don't know what happened with the second booking. You tell me, can we still do connecting rooms? Is it worth me like pursuing? And she looks in the computer and she says, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning right now. I have a lot of people checking in and checking out. I think it'll work, but do you mind coming back in the afternoon and we'll put it together? And I went, sure. And I said, I don't mind booking another room. She goes, well, I don't know if you'll need to do that. We'll look at what the difference is. We go out, we spend our day, we come back, and at this point, I really just wanted the connecting rooms, Robert, because again, it's like the premium economy example where I had my wife go look at it. We've never booked connecting rooms. Our kids haven't been old enough to trust them in a room alone. Just not trust them in a room where they just wouldn't want to be alone. This was an opportunity. I'm like, okay, this is our opportunity. This could open up more travel to hotels if we just book connecting rooms. So we get back and I talk to the agent again and I say, remember me this morning? She goes, I do remember you. She goes, okay, let me talk to my manager. And she comes back and she goes, yeah, I know. Okay, we're going to put you in these 2 rooms. There's a difference each night of around, I think she said like 1,800 kroner, which is like $180.
I'm with you. I've got it down now. Not lop off the last digit.
Right, probably a little less than $180. But who's counting? And I said, well, here's the thing. I've got a lot of points. Do you mind if I just book another room with my points? And she goes, oh, that's fine. So I pull out the phone. I go on Choice. I book another room. And she goes, well, I don't see it yet on the computer. Oh, there it is. She goes, yeah, I can make this work. And so she starts tapping away. She hands me 2 key cards. We move our stuff from our family room to these 2 connecting rooms. And, one of the things you said, again, was in my mind as I checked into these 2 rooms. It was actually from your Japan trip report, which, as an aside, I think we need to post on this feed, right?
Oh, yeah. We should get around to doing that. Yeah, 2 crazy trips, yeah.
Having connecting rooms gave us 2 bathrooms, which was huge. That's like you had a connecting situation in Japan. It was like a suite and a room, and the 2 bathrooms are the killer feature. I think you might have even had 3 bathrooms or something at that point. But that extra space really was nice because the kids could take a shower, do whatever they want to do, and we're in another world. We're like all the way on the other side of the connecting door, and it just felt way better than a family room. And so I think that the value of it in that specific situation was so worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would do it all the time. I mean, it really depends. Like if I'm looking at a room that's $600, 2 of them becomes really cost prohibitive. But with these strawberry hotels and being able to use choice points, wow, it really worked out really, really well.
So many things that right, like it's incredibly novel to be able to book, especially with points, while you're at the hotel, an additional room, and then poof, it shows up there. That's really cool. It's like being at the airport and like, where do I want to fly now? Tap, tap, tap. Okay, here we go. And the fact that you were booking with city points transferred over to choice and poof, that all worked out too. That's like double magic. And like you said, at the other end, we want to avoid booking 2 rooms because it gets cost prohibitive. They're $1,000 night hotel because you're in Paris and the Olympics are going on.
Yeah.
Well, how about $2,000? What's the big deal? Just book 2 rooms. It's like, well, you kind of understand the money gets to be an issue at some point. So it's a great use. How often are you going to be in Scandinavia? You got to use that city to choice redemption while you can. And good experiment with the connecting rooms. So the kids were cool with that. They thought it was novel having that connecting room, and you guys all spread out, and it worked real well for the whole stay.
They loved it. Yeah. And we had a little bit of a late checkout situation, and I had got to know these check-in reps, and so I just went down in the morning and I said, hey, I was wondering what kind of late checkout can we get? And she's tapping away, and she goes, the best I could do is maybe 1:30 or 2 o'clock. I mean, 1:30 or 2 o'clock, we'll be out of here. We got to catch a flight at 4. So I just wanted to have a little bit of extra time to explore the city, but we pushed it pretty far on that last day, and I think that's like the theme of this trip. There were just so many things going for us this trip, right? Like the language barrier not being there at all. That was allowing us to do things and move really quickly. The weather being really nice was really helpful for us. The amount and options of food being so easy and accessible allowed us to just We don't need to worry about packing anything or whatever. We can just pop into a store and do whatever we want to do. And it was the first time, I think, that we got to really just explore our interests and our kids' interests. Like, my daughter was really into exploring for souvenirs and buying different things there that she can't get here. She somehow found this store that sells like random stuff. It's called Normal Store. And it's just like a Walgreens, basically, right? But they have a whole section of Tic Tacs and candies and American snacks and foods and foreign snacks and foods. And she just loved it. And so it's like, okay, every city we were in, she goes, I want to see the Normal Store here. Okay, let's find it. It was so easy for us, like, because we had a car, or if we didn't have a car, we're in Oslo, and it's like, well, the Normal Store's across the street, so let's just walk over there. Like, everything was going our way, and it's just one of those rare trips where everything went our way. Maybe we had the ferry situation that didn't go 100%, but all the bookings worked out and everything in the car, and I drove like over 1,000 miles without any issues, and it's just a win, a huge win, Robert. And when travel's like that, it just makes you want to do more of it. That was so great. Can we do that again? Can we make something like this happen? And we put together these trips that are pretty, I'd say, ambitious, I think, Robert. Like flights and trains and boats and cars and planes, and I expected it to be harder to put together. I don't want to say that as like a brag or anything, but you can sit at home and put together really amazing experiences halfway around the world with the tools that are at our disposal. And I think that's amazing.
Well, I think you come into travel with the right attitude. A lot of people would just harp on the things that weren't the way they were accustomed to them being at home. You seem to relish and delight in those differences, and that makes you and your family well suited to travel. And I think your attitude the whole time just makes it, okay, we didn't catch the ferry, but that's part of the adventure. My Japan trip report, right? We're talking about almost getting fleeced for Japanese baseball tickets. That's the thing we remember. It's the fun part about it, right? So yeah, you make lemonade out of the lemons that you get along the way, and everyone has a good time. What's the family's collective opinion on this type of long distance travel, further away from home? Scandinavia in general, or anything else to say about the return flights? Air France on the way back, I assume you said business class both ways, right?
Yeah, both ways. And I mean, we did one train back to the airport. The lounge in Oslo was just terrible. I mean, just completely not worth visiting. I think maybe that'll change with SAS joining SkyTeam. We couldn't use the SAS lounge. There's a special lounge just for Air France and some other carriers. I don't know how that's going to shake out. But anyways, that's not even important. Flew back, Air France. We had an overnight in Paris, which I was a little bit worried about. But again, it one of the things, like the reasons this trip was so successful is we were never really rushed. And so I tried to pivot, right? I wanted more time in Oslo. I called Air France. I came up with this really thin, flimsy excuse that one of our flights was not Air France operated. It was operated by Amelia by Air France, and I only wanted to be on Air France metal. And I actually got agents that were like sympathetic, and they were like, sure, we can move you to Saturday, but you'll have an 85-minute connection from Terminal 2E to Terminal 2F to Terminal 2E, and you'll have to re-clear immigration and security. And I went like, and the flight leaves Oslo at 6:30 in the morning. I just looked at my wife and I was like, you know what? We might be able to get more time in Oslo, but we'll be like dead when we get home from that, if we even make that connection. And so we had this overnight. We had an Uber pick us up. We stayed off the airport because the Paris Olympics were causing this like incredible price inflation on all the airport hotels, and took an Uber in the morning back to the airport, and zero friction. We got all the time in the world to catch this Uber. We got all the time in the world in the morning, and clear security, jump on the plane, get back to LAX. And the only thing that's awful is our luggage took like an hour to show up. Like so long that we were ready to fill out a lost luggage form, along with like a dozen other people. And by the end of all of that, my wife was just like, I don't really like Air France. And so I don't know if we could do a whole show on that.
Just because the luggage, or something deeper than that?
In fact, actually halfway through the trip, she went, I'm thinking about our flight out here. I don't really like Air France. I was like, well, what was it? She's like, like the food was like okay. They were really cold as far as like coming around the cabin or asking if we needed anything. Kind of just disappeared after they did the food service. Never came back around to check on anyone. I'm sure you could have pressed the call button. But she just said like, we had 2 kids, and like we've flown on all these other carriers where they've shown a lot of interest in the kids and really helped take care of the kids' needs, and they were just gone. And so that was her big complaint on them. And on the way back, I thought they were actually worse at that. they were like, they had a really quick meal service on the way back, and then, I mean, we didn't see them until 90 minutes before we landed.
Wow.
We didn't see a single, like, I'm sure you could have pressed a button again, and we were in that forward mini cabin on the way home. You know, the 777 has that little mini cabin behind first class, and we were in there on the way home, and I thought, well, this is going to have more service because it's just smaller and there's less people. And no, they're just, every time I'd go to the lavatory, all the flight attendants were just hanging out in the galley, like waiting for someone to press a button. I don't know what it was.
I don't like that. I don't like having to press the button.
I don't either.
Show me what the service standard is here, and we'll see. I'll hit the button if I got a kind of semi-emergency going on. So, yeah, that's interesting that the service wasn't so great. I mean, like you say, it's just the bed, but you like a little something more than dish out the food and take off.
Yeah, but, and I say that my wife doesn't want to fly Air France anymore, but there were no other options. And if there are no other options, you can't get too upset about what you have to deal with when it's better than the alternative, which would have been Norse Atlantic Airways. And if she felt that the service was bad on Air France, wait till she saw the service on that. It would have been a completely different standard.
No, it's something to keep in mind, right? Like there are options out there.
If I want to go back to Europe and there's a really great way to get to Italy and it's Air France through Charles de Gaulle in business class at a good price, I'm going to pitch it to her and say, look, it's the best alternative. And she'll go, okay, we'll do it. But
right.
You know, I hadn't flown Air France ever. And you just read things, and I think people maybe have different experiences than you, but people also inject their own personal bias. And maybe I have that bias too. Maybe I'm remembering this trip as just fantastic in all areas, but I'm not remembering Air France as fantastic in all areas. And so that's different than what I had heard before we got on this trip. So
that's unfortunate, but overall, it sounds like a big win. I mean,
overall.
I'm tempted. I think I'd like to check out Copenhagen. I'm not sure how you pronounce it even. I know some people in the community have gone there. I look forward to picking their brains and see how that was going. I don't think I'd get so courageous about going up north into the more remote areas. I think I might do more urban kind of something, but maybe I'm missing out by not getting out and checking out the other parts of the country.
Either way, Robert, you know, my wife, she just goes on and on about Oslo. It's so clean, so much art, so much culture, so easy to get around, the food, everything about it. And I can only assume that all the other major cities in countries in that area are very similar. One thing that I forgot to mention, Robert, and that is so annoying is the cigarette smoke. It's bad. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's bad over there. If you're really sensitive to that cigarette smoke, it was the first thing that greeted us when we got off the train in Oslo, and we were like, whoa, where are we? It's even the kids, they have a tough time with it. You're in a restaurant. People are still smoking in restaurants there. You know,
that's crazy.
I think it's like the outdoor patio area, but yeah, you know, you're like, can you move us? Like, oh, you don't like the smoke? No, we don't like the smoke. Yeah.
You don't prefer the smoke? Wow, that's crazy. You think of so many of the little indicators you've given us along the way have been kind of green sustainability, but I guess smoking seems a little inconsistent with that. Good to know. That's a hard thing to pick up on a guidebook or just something from. I can't see that on the Google map. I don't see smoke coming off the Oslo.
But yeah, Robert, I think it's worth a look in that area, and I think you might want to stay at a Strawberry Hotel. I hate to say it.
Well, it's interesting. There's not a lot of Hiltons and Hyatts there, or even Marriotts, and also not a lot of Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons. You know, kind of the high-end chains, right? So what are you going to do if the best option happens to be a great points option? You go with it.
I appreciate you sitting down and having this long conversation with me, Robert. You think we can close this show out now?
Yeah, I appreciate you getting to it while it's fresh because some of the colorful details fade. So thanks for making time as you're readjusting to the sun does go down there at some point. So I hope reentry's been nice and smooth. I'm sure you'll recover no problem. You know, people talk about the time difference and stuff like that, but you know, come on, get out there and travel, right?
Yeah. No, it wasn't bad at all. Even the kids, they've readjusted after 2 days, and they're at school today. And if that's the reason I'm not going to go, I'm just looking for a reason. I could say I don't want to go because of cigarette smoke. I mean, that's more of a reason, I think, for me.
There's always a reason. Stay home, save lives.
There's always a reason. Yeah.
All right, let's close it out. And boy, we'll get to our subscribers have been clamoring for a new show. It's been a while since we've reviewed the crazy stunts that we're doing to earn these miles, but we talk a lot more about those on the paid show. So thanks for joining us this week. For a more in-depth discussion about points and miles, visit us at patreon.com/Milenomics. There you'll get a special link to listen to additional content right in your mobile podcast app or on your computer where we speak more freely about topics like these.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the site.